Right, thanks Ben. Yeah, so as Ben said, I'm looking at attacking success from the set piece in the rugby union, and I focused my study on the Super 14 this year. So how I came about my research question and looking through the introduction, I found through previous literature that try scoring was considered a major source of success in rugby union. To go on to look further at where tries are scored and how they're scored, within the last World Cup, it was noted that half of the tries scored were sourced from a set piece. So when I talk about set piece, either a scrum or a lineout, and I'll show you videos of those as we go through. And then in 2009, last year's Tri Nations tournament, which composes of the countries that compete in the Super 14 season, 87% of tries were scored within the first three phases of attack from that set piece. So I focused my study in on those first three phases of play. Okay, so my aim and objectives was to examine successful attacking team patterns of play from the set piece, and then to further determine contributors of successful performances of the set piece and to help promote try scoring. So just a couple of acknowledgements, my supervisor Dr. Kean Willer and Professor Keith Lyons, and also to Brumbies Rugby and UC who helped funded this project. So going into my methods, I looked at all games of the Super 14, including the final, so 94 games in total. I coded all contestable lineouts and scrums, and the following four phases of attack. I thought I'd throw one extra phase in, but it didn't make it to analysis in the end. Teams were then grouped in accordance to their ranking, so the top four, middle five, and bottom five ranked teams. I then had positional groupings, the common positional groupings within rugby union that are used by coaches and by the literature. The location of the set pieces between attacking and defensive zones, and then variables identifying individual ball characteristics and also team patterns of play. I then grouped phased outcomes into positive and negative phase outcomes, so I was able to determine a decision tree, as you'll see later on. So with my data analysis, I used chi-squared and association tests, and this was used to test the association between individual ball characteristics and their associated phase outcomes, and also to identify patterns of play that help promote success within rugby union. And then I used a standard residual value, which basically, quick outline of what it is it's set at 2 or equal to or greater than 2 is considered an event more likely to occur than expected by chance, and if it's equal to or less than -2, it's less likely to occur than expected by chance. So, and throughout my study I did all the coding, so all the coding was done by myself, and I found that I had both outstanding reliability in intra and inter-tester reliability. So going on to my findings, I then analysed where tries were being scored within those first three phases of attack, and the majority of tries were being scored in that first phase, so 59.7% of all tries from those first three phases. So moving on to this decision tree, it looks a bit complex at the moment. I just want you to focus in on these try scoring numbers. So following a negative phase outcome, this is from a lineout, a negative phase outcome from the first phase of play. You can see only one instance of try scoring occurred in this second phase. No instances of try scoring throughout the whole season occurred in the third phase. When you have a positive outcome in that first phase of play, we have 18 instances of try scoring in the second phase and a combined total of 20 try scoring instances in that third phase. So this further highlights that importance of a positive phase outcome on that first phase of play. And we see a similar trend from scrums. So once again, only 3 instances during the second phase of play following a negative phase outcome, and once again 0 instances during the third phase. Following a positive phase outcome, we have 8 instances during the second phase and 10 on that third phase, so quite a substantial increase in try scoring. So then I looked at the set pieces conducted in certain areas on the field, and just focusing in on 2 areas of the field, the attacking 25-metre area. There was no noticeable differences in frequencies between group team rankings and try scoring. However, the top 4 teams were more likely than to hold possession or less likely to turn over possession within that part of the field. So it wasn't so much they were trying to perform a try scoring movement on that first phase of play, but we're using it to set up for the second and third phases. Now within the defensive 25-metre area, a key pattern of play was identified by the top 4 teams. So they had the least purposeful end phase outcomes, which purposeful end, I mean they kick for territory, or a purposeful kick, a purposeful end to a play. So they were less likely to kick the ball and end the play purposefully off that first phase of play compared to the bottom 5 and the middle 5 teams. So I looked at their ball carries from the first phase of play when they were in their own defensive zone, and there was no pass received during 64.9% of all those ball carries, and the majority of ball carries were made by the loose forwards, so the number 8 and the flankers, for those of you familiar with rugby. I then went on to look at the second phase of play and found that the majority of all the second phases, so 75.8% of all second phases, was when the purposeful end happened. So it sort of highlights that they were using that first phase of play to gain momentum before ending the play, and in turn they had less pressure on them when they were conducting that purposeful end. So rather than show you a diagram with lines, I've provided a video at slow speed I can talk you through of what occurred. So the Waratahs versus the Western Force. The Waratahs, this team here, were a top 4 ranked team at the end of the year. So here you have a scrum in their defensive area, right on their try line. You have the number 8, the loose forward, taking the ball, driving up, and he's attracting defenders and also leaving the set piece behind with all the forwards. So he's got less defenders in that subsequent phase of play, passes it to the inside back, who then conducts a purposeful end. So he's in turn got less pressure on him, and as you can see, where the ball ends up is down in this 10-metre line. So he's actually gained 40 metres rather than a kick making only 10 when he's under pressure. So if I look at individual ball carry characteristics, in agreement with other literature, I found offloads and tackle breaks were more than likely to produce over the game line phase outcomes and try outcomes. And I went on to look at who was more likely to produce these offloads and tackle breaks, and it was the outside backs, so the wingers and the fullbacks. I then went on to look at their patterns of play from the first phase, so the outside backs, and identified certain patterns of play that were more likely to produce offloads and tackle breaks from the outside back ball carries. I found that during the offloads you had a middle to wide distribution of the ball, so 3 or more passes from the ruck. You had an outside pass to that ball carrier, so the pass followed the way the play was running, and an outside running line when challenging the defensive line. Now if we look at tackle breaks, a bit of a change. We still have that wide distribution in width, and that's expected as that's where the wingers and the fullbacks tend to hang around, is further from the ruck or the set piece. But this time we have an inside pass, so the pass is turned back against the way of play, and an inside running line. And I've just got a couple of videos here. So here we have the offload. We have the Hurricanes here demonstrating the offload. So what you'll see is a wide distribution here. We've got 1, 2, 3 passes to this fullback. He's running an outside running line, and we'll now pop the offload, and they'll get substantially over that advantage line, gain territory. Now if I look at the tackle break, we have the Chiefs here off a lineout set piece, a wide distribution. So he's going to pop this third pass on the inside to that ball runner. He runs the inside running line, breaks the tackle, and goes on to make more yards, more territory. So what does this mean in summary? Basically the first phase of play is vital to achieving success, and should be used in order to as a major contributor to try scoring. And it's proven that it also, through those decision tree diagrams, has a continual effect on subsequent phase play. So it's really important we get a positive outcome on that first phase of play. Also, especially in the defensive zone, as I showed you before, the first phase of play may be used to gain forward progression and relieve defensive pressure on that second and third phases of play. Tackle breaks and offloads are key determinants of success and desirable outcomes, and that is in agreement with a few other studies. And also, basically my study was intended for coaching purposes, and hopefully coaches will be able to use these patterns of play that I've identified to develop game-specific drills and team strategies to help promote success and try scoring. Just key references and any questions.